Hey, everyone. I don't even know why I'm writing this. Maybe just to get it all out. Maybe because I still can't believe this happened to me. Or maybe because I've spent the last 5 years as the town villain, and no matter what I do, I can't change the story people have in their heads about me. My name's John. I was married to Adelia for 8 years. We had what I thought was a great life, 2 beautiful daughters, Amanda and Miranda, a stable home, and a future we were both working toward. Or at least, I thought we were working toward it. Turns out, she was working on something else entirely. I remember the day she left like it just happened. It was a Sunday morning. I was in the kitchen making pancakes, same as I always did on Sundays, waiting for the girls to come running in. Instead, I got a knock at the door. Sheriff's deputies. 2 of them. I didn't even get a chance to speak before they told me I was under investigation. For child abuse. I laughed. Actually laughed, because what else could I do? It sounded ridiculous. Then they handed me a piece of paper, an emergency restraining order. I was to have no contact with my wife or my daughters. Effective immediately. I don't remember much after that. I know I argued. I know I tried to call Adelia, but her phone was off. I know the deputies watched me pack a bag and then escorted me out of my own house like I was some kind of monster. Adelia had already taken the girls. Left town. Just like that. I had no warning. No signs. One day, I was a dad making breakfast, and the next, I was a pariah. A man branded as a child abuser, the kind of person people whisper about in grocery store aisles. And the worst part? I had no idea why she was doing this. But I was about to find out. I spent the first few days in a fog. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dingy motel room I'd been forced into, staring at my phone, waiting for something, anything to make sense. But the only thing I got was silence. No answer from Adelia. No response from her parents. No word from my daughters. Just the weight of the accusation hanging over me, like a noose waiting to tighten. Then, the rumors started. I walked into the gas station to grab coffee, and the cashier, someone who'd known me for years, wouldn't meet my eyes. When I stepped outside, I overheard 2 old men on the bench whispering about me. Heard they found bruises on the little one. Disgusting. Never thought he was the type. I was too shocked to react. They were talking about me. Like I was some kind of monster. That same night, Helen Beard, my assistant at work and one of the few people who actually believed in me, showed up at my motel door with a stack of papers. "You need to see this," she said, her face pale. It was Adelia's official statement. In it, she claimed I was violent. That I had a history of hurting Amanda and Miranda. That she had been too scared to come forward until now. She even said she feared for her own safety. I felt sick. This was the woman I had loved. The mother of my children. How could she look me in the eye all those years and say she loved me, knowing she was capable of this? Then I saw the part that nearly broke me. She claimed I had abandoned them. That the moment she tried to confront me about my behavior, I ran. She even had fake documents, emails, bank transfers, showing that I had been planning to leave for months. It was so well planned, so perfectly executed, that even a stranger would have believed it. And worst of all, everyone did. Within a week, I lost everything. My job put me on indefinite leave to avoid bad press. My friends disappeared. The guys I used to grab beers with wouldn't return my calls. I wasn't just alone, I was erased. And Adelia? She was nowhere to be found. I wish I could say I fought back immediately. That I marched into a lawyer's office and started the war to clear my name. But the truth? I crumbled. I spent the first few weeks in a haze. I barely ate. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my daughters' faces, their small hands grabbing mine, their sleepy voices saying "Good night, Daddy." And now they were gone. Not just gone, ripped away, with the whole world telling them I was a monster. I tried reaching out to my former in-laws. Adelia's parents had always been decent people, or so I thought. I left voicemails, texted, even showed up at their house. But the second I knocked, her father opened the door just enough for me to see his face. "We have nothing to say to you." "Please," I begged. "Just tell me where they are. Let me see my girls." He didn't even hesitate. "You'll never see them again." And then he slammed the door. That was when it really hit me. This wasn't just Adelia. They were all in on it. The next few months were hell. People whispered when I walked by. Some stopped whispering altogether and just spat words at me. Piece of garbage. Coward. I hope they lock you up. Then the real trouble started. One night, I left my motel room to grab something from my car. As soon as I stepped outside, something hard smashed into my shoulder. A rock. Then another, bouncing off the hood of my car. "Get out of our town, freak!" someone shouted from the dark. I couldn't even see their face. Just heard them laughing as they ran. I told the cops. They didn't care. "Maybe you should consider relocating," the officer said, like I was the problem. I was living in a nightmare, and no one was coming to wake me up. The worst part? I started to wonder if Adelia had one. Maybe she had erased me. Maybe I really would never see Amanda and Miranda again. Maybe I should just pack up, change my name, and disappear the way she wanted me to. But then Helen saved me. It was about 6 months after Adelia vanished. I was at rock bottom, sitting in a dingy bar with my 4th drink in front of me, just staring at the counter. I didn't even look up when someone sat next to me. "You're an idiot," Helen said. I barely reacted. "Thanks." She grabbed my glass and slid it away. "You want to sit here feeling sorry for yourself, or do you want to find your kids?" That got my attention. I turned to her. "How?" She pulled out a folder and slapped it on the bar. "You're not going to like what I found." I opened it, and my whole body went cold. Bank statements, emails, rental applications, fake identities. Adelia had planned everything. She hadn't just taken the girls and left. She had built a whole new life for them. New names, new addresses, even fake adoption records to make it look like Ronald Peterson, some random man I'd never even heard of, was their legal father. She had erased me on paper. I gripped the edge of the folder so hard my knuckles went white. "Where is she?" Helen hesitated. "That's the problem. She covered her tracks well. But I have a lead." She pulled out a newspaper clipping. It was an article about a school fundraiser in a town 2 states away. And right there in the photo was Adelia, smiling, standing next to a man I assumed was Ronald Peterson. And beside them, 2 little girls. Amanda and Miranda. My daughters. Alive. Safe. And living a lie. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to drink myself into an early grave. I wasn't going to let Adelia win. I was going to get my daughters back. And I didn't care what it took. For the first time in nearly a year, I felt alive. I had spent months drowning in grief, letting the world believe I was a monster. But now? Now I had something real. Something tangible. A lead. Adelia thought she was smart. She thought changing their names, forging documents, and hiding behind Ronald Peterson would keep her safe. But she made one mistake. She let herself be seen. And that was all I needed. Helen and I sat in my motel room, spreading everything out on the bed. The article, the bank statements, the fake adoption records, every scrap of evidence we had. "They're in Oak Ridge," Helen said, tapping the newspaper. "It's a small town, but we can't just roll in there asking questions. If Adelia got the whole town to turn on you here, what do you think she's done there?" She was right. I had no doubt Adelia had spent the last year spinning her new web of lies. If I went in blind, she'd find a way to shut me out again. "We need proof," I said. "Real proof." Helen nodded. "Then we dig." And dig we did. The first step was tracking Ronald Peterson. If this guy had legally adopted my daughters, there had to be paperwork. Custody agreements. Something. It didn't take long to find his background. Ronald was a businessman, mid-40s, no criminal record. On the surface, he was squeaky clean. But Helen, being the genius she was, knew how to look deeper. "This guy's been through 2 bankruptcies," she said, scrolling through financial records. His last company folded just before he married Adelia. And get this, he tried to start a new business right after they moved to Oak Ridge. Took out a huge loan. And I asked. "And it failed miserably," Helen said. "He's drowning in debt." I sat back, thinking. So he needs money. Helen smirked. And Adelia just happens to come into his life right when he needs financial help? Seems convenient, doesn't it? A thought hit me, making my stomach turn. You think she paid him? Maybe not outright, Helen said. But she's definitely benefiting from his desperation. It made sense. If Adelia wanted to disappear with the girls, she'd need a man willing to play along. Someone willing to fake adoption papers, fake a marriage, fake a whole life. And what better candidate than a man desperate enough to do anything for financial stability? Step 2 was confirming my daughters were actually in Oak Ridge. Helen and I went through everything: school records, social media, even local news articles. If Adelia was keeping them isolated, they wouldn't have online profiles, but that didn't mean the town itself wouldn't mention them. And that's when we found it. A blurry yearbook photo. 2 little girls, standing side by side. Their names were listed as Alyssa and Melanie Peterson. But I didn't need a name to know who they were. Amanda and Miranda. They were there. They were real. And I was going to bring them home. But first, I needed the law on my side. I had already learned the hard way that walking into this blind would only get me shoved aside. If I wanted my daughters back, I needed a legal hammer. That's where Judge Donald McDonald came in. Now, McDonald wasn't just some random judge. He was a federal judge, and more importantly, he was the one man in the legal system who actually believed in me. Back when Adelia first accused me, he was one of the few who said the case didn't add up. But with no proof and Adelia's lies spreading like wildfire, even he had been forced to keep his hands tied. But now I had something real. I took everything to him. He read through the forged documents, the name changes, the fake adoption papers. His face stayed neutral, but when he finished, he let out a slow breath. She really did all this? He asked. I nodded. And I need to bring them home. McDonald sat back in his chair, thinking. Then finally, he said the words I'd been praying for. I'll bring in the FBI. Adelia had played her game well. She had lied, manipulated, and erased me from my daughters' lives. But she made one mistake. She left a trail. And I was going to use it to tear her world apart. McDonald didn't waste time. Within days, the FBI was involved. Parental kidnapping, identity fraud, forged documents, it was all on the table. But we had to be careful. If Adelia caught even a hint that we were onto her, she'd run again. And this time, she'd bury herself so deep I might never find my daughters. So we set a trap. McDonald filed a sealed court order to review the adoption records. If they were fake, which we knew they were, it would trigger an automatic investigation. Adelia wouldn't know until it was too late. Meanwhile, Helen and I headed to Oak Ridge. Not as John the child abuser. Not as a man hunting his ex-wife. Just a couple of out-of-towners looking for property. Because if I was going to bring my daughters home, I needed to see them with my own eyes first. And when I did, I almost lost it. I spotted them outside their school. Amanda and Miranda, no, Alyssa and Melanie, laughing, running to the car where Adelia stood waiting. They looked happy. But they didn't recognize me. And that shattered me more than anything. Seeing my daughters again after all this time should have made me feel relief. But instead, it felt like a punch to the gut. They didn't look scared. They didn't look lost. They looked content. Like they had a normal life. Like they had forgotten me. I wanted to run to them, call out their real names, tell them the truth, but I couldn't. Not yet. If I made one wrong move, Adelia would disappear again. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I watched them climb into the car. I watched Adelia kiss them on the forehead like she was some perfect mother. And I did nothing. Back at the motel, Helen could tell something was off. What happened? She asked. They don't remember me, I said. She replaced me. Helen's expression hardened. Then we make sure she never gets to do it again. A day later, McDonald called. They found it, he said. The forged adoption. I asked. Everything. Your daughters are still legally yours. The FBI is moving in. Adelia had no idea her perfect little world was about to come crashing down. And this time, she wouldn't be able to run. It all happened fast. One moment, Adelia was living her perfect lie, picking the girls up from school, chatting with other parents, playing the role of devoted mother. The next, FBI agents were surrounding her in the school parking lot. I wasn't there when they took her down. I couldn't be. Legally, I had to stay back until they processed everything. But Helen was watching from a distance, and when she called me, her voice was breathless. They got her. What about Amanda and Miranda? My heart pounded. They're with child services for now, she said. John, they still think Ronald is their father. That was the part that scared me the most. Because even with Adelia in handcuffs, the hardest battle was still ahead. I had to win my daughters back. The moment I got the call that Adelia was in custody, I thought I'd finally feel relief. But instead, I felt terrified. She was out of the picture, but the damage was already done. My daughters had spent 5 years being told I abandoned them, that I didn't love them, that Ronald Peterson was their real father. How do you undo that kind of brainwashing? I had no idea. But I had no choice except to try. When I arrived at child services, my hands were shaking. I had dreamed of this moment for years, but now that I was here, I didn't know what to do. I spotted them through the glass, Amanda and Miranda. They sat together on a couch, nervously holding hands. They looked so much older than I remembered. No longer the little girls who used to run into my arms every evening. A caseworker came up to me. Mr. Lawson, I need to prepare you. I swallowed hard. Just let me see them. She sighed. They don't remember you. The words hit harder than I expected. They think Ronald is their father, she continued gently. This is going to be complicated. I nodded, but inside I was breaking. Then she led me into the room. The girls looked up as I stepped inside. Their eyes flickered with confusion, but there was no recognition. No spark of familiarity. They didn't know me. Miranda, the younger one, clutched Amanda's arm. Who is he? She whispered. Amanda's brow furrowed. I think I've seen him before. My heart clenched. Hey girls, I said softly, keeping my distance. You're the bad man. Miranda's voice was so small, but the words shattered me. I couldn't breathe. Adelia had poisoned them against me. Miranda, the caseworker said, that's not true. This is your real father. Miranda shook her head violently. No. Ronald is our dad. He loves us. He wouldn't leave us like you did. I felt like I was going to be sick. Miranda, I tried again, my voice barely steady. I never left you. I was taken from you. Amanda studied me, uncertainty in her eyes. Mom said you hurt us. I almost collapsed right there. Adelia had destroyed my daughter's trust in me. She had rewritten history, and I wasn't sure how I'd ever fix it. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to stop trying. I knew this wouldn't be easy. Adelia had spent 5 years twisting the truth, filling my daughters' heads with lies. To them, I wasn't their father. I was the villain in their story. And Ronald? He was the hero. The loving, stable father who had been there when I supposedly abandoned them. It didn't matter that none of it was true. What mattered was that they believed it. And that was something I had to change. For the first few meetings, the girls barely spoke to me. Amanda sat stiffly, arms crossed, always watching but never engaging. Miranda hid behind her, answering questions with short, clipped responses. When I told them stories about our life before, they looked at me like I was making it all up. When you were little, Miranda, you used to fall asleep on my chest every night. You called it Daddy's pillow. Miranda's nose scrunched up. No, I didn't. Amanda frowned. Mom never said anything about that. Of course, she didn't. She had erased every trace of me from their memories. The real breakthrough didn't come until I showed them proof. Helen and I had spent hours gathering old photos, videos, even Amanda's old drawings where she had scribbled "I love Daddy" in messy crayon letters. I brought the album to our next visit and gently slid it across the table. I know you don't believe me, I said. So don't take my word for it. Look for yourselves. They hesitated, but curiosity won. Amanda flipped open the album first. Miranda peeked over her shoulder. The first photo was of the three of us at the park, Amanda on my shoulders, Miranda clutching my hand, both of them grinning like they had the whole world in front of them. Amanda stared. That's me. I nodded. That's you. She turned the page. A picture of me and Miranda baking cookies, flour dusted all over her tiny face. Miranda, look, Amanda whispered. Miranda's lips parted slightly. I don't, she shook her head. That's fake. I expected that. But I stayed calm. It's not. Page after page, they saw the truth. Videos on my phone showed them laughing, playing, running into my arms. In one, toddler Amanda proudly told the camera, "Daddy is my favorite person ever." Amanda's expression cracked for the first time. But Mom said, she trailed off, confused. She lied to you, I said gently. I never left you. I never hurt you. I never stopped loving you. Miranda looked up at me, her face unreadable. Then why did Mom say you did? I took a deep breath. Because she didn't want me in your lives. And for the first time I saw it, the doubt creeping in. Adelia's lies were unraveling. The pictures planted the first seed of doubt. But it wasn't enough. Amanda and Miranda were caught between two versions of reality, one they had believed for years, and one that was just now being revealed. They weren't ready to admit their mother had lied. They weren't ready to trust me. And I couldn't blame them. If I had been in their position, would I have believed me either? The next few visits were tense. Amanda was quieter now, more thoughtful. I could tell she was processing everything, but she wasn't ready to let go of what she had known. Miranda, though? She dug her heels in. She wouldn't lie to us, she said one afternoon, arms crossed. She's our mom. I nodded. I know you love her. She glared at me. So why are you trying to ruin everything? That one stung. I'm not trying to ruin anything, I said carefully. I'm trying to fix what was taken from us. Miranda huffed. We had a good life. Me, Amanda, Mom, and Dad. I felt like I had been punched in the chest. Ronald. She was talking about Ronald like he was her real father. I clenched my hands under the table. He's not your dad. He is. Miranda shouted. He tucked us in every night. He took us to the zoo. He was there. You weren't. Silence. Amanda looked down at the table, not saying anything. I swallowed hard. Miranda, the only reason I wasn't there was because I didn't know where you were. I spent years looking for you. She shook her head. You're lying. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. Then I slid it toward her. She hesitated, then glanced at the screen. Hundreds of messages. Lawyers. Private investigators. Police departments. Court appeals. All searching for them. Miranda's eyes flicked across the words, confusion knitting her brows. She looked at Amanda. Amanda took the phone, scrolling slowly. Mom told us you didn't care. I forced myself to stay steady. I never stopped caring. Amanda's lips pressed together. She turned to Miranda, something shifting between them. I could see it happening. A crack in the walls Adelia had built. That night, I got a call from Helen. John, you're not going to believe this, she said. Adelia's trying to cut a deal. I sat up straight. What? She knows she's screwed. She's offering to confess everything, if she gets a lighter sentence. Anger surged through me. After all the damage she had done, she thought she could bargain her way out? But then Helen said something that made my blood run cold. She also said she has something to tell the girls. My stomach twisted. If she got to them first, she could twist the story one last time. And I wasn't going to let that happen. I barely slept that night. The thought of Adelia getting one last chance to twist Amanda and Miranda's minds made my skin crawl. She had already stolen 5 years from me, 5 years of birthdays, scraped knees, bedtime stories, and goodnight kisses. And now she wanted to speak to them? No. Not without me there. The next morning, I was in the courtroom before the sun even rose, sitting across from MacDonald and the FBI agents overseeing the case. She wants to confess, MacDonald said, rubbing his temples. She's hoping for a reduced sentence in exchange for full disclosure. Disclosure of what? I snapped. We already have proof of her forgeries, the kidnapping, what else is there? MacDonald sighed. That's what we need to find out. I clenched my jaw. And the girls? The FBI agent, a man named Russell, folded his hands on the table. She requested a private meeting with them. No, I said immediately. John. No. I slammed my fist against the table. She's already filled their heads with enough lies. You're telling me she gets one more shot at manipulating them? Absolutely not. MacDonald held up a hand. I agree. But we also can't deny them the right to hear from her if they choose. I exhaled sharply, trying to keep my emotions in check. Then I have to be there. Russell nodded. We can arrange that. 2 days later, I sat in a visitation room at the detention center, waiting. Amanda and Miranda sat across from me. They were nervous. Fidgeting. They didn't want to be here, and honestly, neither did I. Then the door opened. Adelia walked in, shackled at the wrists. For a second, I barely recognized her. She wasn't the confident, put-together woman I once knew. She looked tired. Hollow. But the moment she saw me, her lips curled into a faint smirk. Like she still had control. I gritted my teeth. Not this time. She sat down, looking at Amanda and Miranda with big wet eyes. My sweet girls, she whispered. I missed you so much. Amanda hesitated, but Miranda's face softened immediately. Mom. I stiffened. Adelia's eyes flicked to me. I need to talk to them alone. No, I said flatly. She sighed dramatically. John, this is between me and my daughters. They're our daughters, I corrected. And I'm not letting you lie to them again. She turned to Amanda, playing the victim. Sweetheart, don't you want to talk without him controlling everything? Amanda frowned, glancing at me. I held my breath. Then, finally. No, Amanda said. I think he should stay. Adelia's expression cracked. She hadn't expected that. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Adelia sighed, looking down. I made mistakes, she said. But everything I did was to protect you. From what? Amanda demanded. Adelia swallowed hard. Your father. Stop, I snapped. Whatever lie you're about to tell, don't. They've seen the truth now. Adelia's jaw tightened. They don't know everything. Neither do you, I shot back. Do they know you paid Ronald to be their father? Do they know you falsified every adoption record? Miranda's mouth fell open. What? Adelia's eyes darted to her. It's complicated. I scoffed. No, it's simple. You stole them from me. Miranda stared at her mother, the doubt finally hitting her. Mom, is that true? Adelia's lips parted, but no words came out. Amanda's voice was sharper. Is it true? Adelia's shoulders slumped. Then finally she whispered, yes. Silence. Pure, deafening silence. I watched my daughters' faces change, hurt, betrayal, disbelief. And in that moment, Adelia lost them. When the guards took her away, Amanda and Miranda didn't cry. They didn't say goodbye. They just sat there, stunned, as their whole world shattered. And as painful as it was to watch, I knew, this was the first step toward healing. Adelia's confession should have made everything easier. It should have been the moment Amanda and Miranda saw the truth for what it was. But instead, it left them lost. They had spent years believing one thing, and now, in a single moment, everything had been flipped upside down. The woman who had raised them, who had been their only parent for 5 years, had admitted to lying, kidnapping, and stealing them away from their real father. That kind of betrayal doesn't just fade overnight. And I knew that. But knowing didn't make it any easier to watch. The ride home from the detention center was silent. Helen drove, giving us space, while Amanda and Miranda sat in the back seat, staring out the windows. I wanted to say something. To comfort them. To fix it. But what do you even say after something like that? By the time we got to the house, a rental I had set up as soon as it looked like I might get custody back, both girls looked exhausted. They didn't speak. They didn't cry. They just shuffled inside like ghosts. Miranda went straight to the guest room and closed the door. Amanda hesitated in the hallway, looking at me like she wanted to ask something but couldn't find the words. So I spoke first. You can be mad at her, I said softly. Amanda flinched. I don't know what to feel. I nodded. That's okay. Her shoulders slumped, and for a second, I thought she might start crying. But then she just turned away. Good night, she mumbled, disappearing into her room. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Helen, who had been standing in the doorway the whole time, gave me a small, sad smile. This is going to take time, she said. I rubbed a hand over my face. I know. They need you to be patient. I nodded. But patience had never been my strong suit. And seeing my daughters, treat me like a stranger was a kind of pain I didn't know how to prepare for. The next few days were rough. Amanda and Miranda barely spoke to me. They stayed in their rooms, quiet, processing everything. They didn't fight, didn't argue, they just existed. And I felt helpless. I cooked their favorite meals. I offered to take them places. I did everything I could to remind them that I was here, that I wanted to be here. But I didn't push them. I let them take the lead, even if that meant giving them space. The first real crack came from Amanda. She walked into the kitchen one evening while I was making dinner, standing awkwardly by the counter. I don't remember any of this, she admitted. I looked up. What do you mean? She gestured vaguely around the room. Cooking. Sitting together. Eating dinner. You and me and Miranda. It feels weird. I set the knife down carefully. Because you don't remember it? She nodded. I wiped my hands on a towel and pulled out my phone, scrolling through the pictures I had saved. Then I turned the screen toward her. A photo of her, barely 5 years old, covered in spaghetti sauce, laughing while Miranda sat beside her making a mess of her own plate. Amanda stared. We used to do this every week, I said. Messy spaghetti night. She swallowed hard. I could see her brain fighting with itself, memories just out of reach, clashing against the false ones Adelia had built. Mom never talked about this, she whispered. I know. She looked up at me, eyes searching. Why? I took a slow breath. Because if you remembered, you might have realized she was lying. Amanda gripped the counter. I could tell she wasn't ready to talk anymore. But she didn't leave, either. She just stood there, staring at the photo. And that was enough. For now. Miranda was harder. She refused to even acknowledge me. I'd catch her watching me sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, but the second I turned, she'd shut down again. It wasn't until nearly a week later that she finally cracked. It was late. I was sitting on the couch, flipping mindlessly through TV channels, when I heard soft footsteps. Miranda stood at the edge of the hallway, arms crossed, looking small. You really looked for us? She asked. I sat up immediately. Every day. She chewed on her lip. I don't get it. What? She shifted. If you cared so much, why did it take so long? My throat tightened. Because your mother stole you. Because she hid you so well I almost never found you. Because she spent years making sure you never even thought to look for me. I swallowed all of it down and just said, I tried. I never stopped trying. Miranda stared at me for a long moment. Then she turned and went back to her room. She didn't say anything else. But that night, when I checked, her door wasn't locked for the first time. We weren't okay yet. I wasn't naive enough to think this would be easy. But we were getting somewhere. And for the first time since getting them back, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I could be their father again. The shift wasn't immediate. There was no big moment where Amanda and Miranda suddenly threw their arms around me and called me dad again. No grand realization where they instantly saw Adelia's lies for what they were and welcomed me back with open hearts. It was slow. Painfully slow. But it was happening. Little things at first. Miranda sitting at the table instead of taking her food back to her room. Amanda actually responding when I asked how her day was. Small cracks forming in the walls they had built around themselves. I didn't push. I didn't demand. I just waited. And one day, it paid off. It was a Saturday morning. I was making breakfast, the same way I used to all those years ago. Pancakes, eggs, bacon. The works. I wasn't expecting anything different. The girls had been avoiding eating meals with me, usually coming in after I left the kitchen. But this time, Amanda sat down at the table. Then Miranda. I froze, spatula halfway in the air. Morning, I said cautiously. Amanda gave me a tiny nod. Miranda stared at the plate. Then she mumbled, I like my eggs scrambled. My heart clenched. Because I knew that. I used to make them for her just the way she liked, extra fluffy, a little bit of cheese. And now she was telling me. Like she was testing me. I remember, I said softly. I turned back to the stove and made them exactly how she used to love them. When I set the plate in front of her, she hesitated for a moment before picking up her fork. She took a bite. Then another. Then Amanda did, too. We ate in silence. But for the first time since they came home, it didn't feel heavy. It felt normal. Like a family. After breakfast, Amanda hovered near the kitchen doorway while I washed the dishes. She looked nervous, shifting from foot to foot. Finally, she spoke. Would you take us to the park? I nearly dropped the plate in my hands. I turned, trying to keep my voice steady. Yeah, of course. She nodded quickly, like she had to get it out before she changed her mind. Miranda too? I asked. Amanda shrugged. I don't know. I'll ask her. She walked off before I could say anything else, but I barely noticed. Because for the first time since I got them back, she had asked me for something. Not because she had to. Not because someone told her to. Because she wanted to. When we got to the park, Miranda didn't leave Amanda's side. They sat on the swings, talking quietly, while I stayed on the bench. I didn't want to push too hard, hover too much. I was terrified of doing anything that might make them shut me out again. So I just sat. Waited. And after a while, Miranda walked over. She stopped in front of me, scuffing her shoe against the dirt. Amanda says you used to push us on the swings. I swallowed. Yeah. Every time we came here. She hesitated, then glanced back at Amanda. Can you do it again? I couldn't even speak. Just nodded. And when I stood up and followed her back to the swings. When I heard her laugh, really laugh, as I pushed her higher into the air, I knew I was getting them back. Piece by piece. Memory by memory. They were mine again. Days passed. Then weeks. The small moments kept coming. Amanda started leaving her door open again. Miranda stopped hesitating before sitting next to me on the couch. They still had walls up, still had questions they weren't ready to ask, but something had changed. They were trying. And that was all I could ask for. But the moment that truly broke me? It happened one evening, completely unexpected. Helen had come over for dinner. She'd been my rock through all of this, and the girls were slowly warming up to her, too. They weren't calling her family yet, but they liked her. Trusted her. After we ate, Miranda was flipping through an old photo album I had left on the coffee table. The same one I had shown them before, but this time, she was going through it by herself. I pretended not to watch as she traced a small hand over one of the pictures. It was an old birthday party, her third, I think. She was sitting on my lap, a cupcake in her hand, grinning up at me like I was the only person in the world. Did I like cupcakes back then? She asked suddenly. I looked up. You loved them. You made me buy them for every birthday, even when you got older. She scrunched her nose. I don't like them now. I smiled. Tastes change. She hesitated. Then quietly she said, but I think I remember this. I froze. That single sentence felt like the most important thing in the world. She remembered. Amanda leaned over, looking at the picture too. I think I do too, she admitted. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. You do. Amanda nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's not clear. But yeah. I think so. I felt like I was about to break down right there, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'm really glad. Miranda didn't say anything for a moment. Then, without looking at me, she mumbled, me too. Helen gave me a small smile from across the room, and I knew she understood. This was huge. But what happened next? That was something I never saw coming. Later that night, I was helping Miranda set up a movie in the living room. Amanda was already curled up in the chair, Helen sitting on the couch, flipping through her phone. Can you pass me the remote? Miranda asked. I grabbed it from the table and handed it to her. Thanks, Dad. Silence. She didn't even realize she had said it. She just grabbed the remote, settled onto the couch, and pressed play. But I couldn't move. I felt Helen's eyes on me. Amanda had noticed, too, her face flickering with recognition. I didn't want to scare Miranda by reacting too much. I didn't want to ruin the moment. So I just swallowed the lump in my throat and sat down. And for the rest of the movie, I barely paid attention to what was on the screen. Because all I could hear, over and over again in my head, was thanks, Dad. I had my daughter back. It took 5 years to lose them. And every second since had been a fight to get them back. But now, sitting on the porch with Amanda and Miranda beside me, watching the sun dip behind the trees, I finally let myself believe it. They were home. Miranda had called me Dad for the first time a week ago. And since then, the word slipped out more and more, like she had been waiting for the right moment and now couldn't stop. Amanda took longer. She was more careful, more hesitant. But then one evening, as I tucked her in after she fell asleep on the couch, she stirred just enough to mumble, "Night, Dad." I had to leave the room before she saw the tears in my eyes. It wasn't perfect yet. We still had so much to rebuild. But the love was there. The bond we thought was broken had only been buried, waiting to be uncovered. And with time, I knew we'd be stronger than ever. Adelia was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Ronald Peterson got 5 for his role in the forgeries and kidnapping. Neither of them would ever have control over Amanda and Miranda again. And that was justice. Helen stayed by my side through everything. She was my friend, my biggest support, and the one person who never doubted me. And as time passed, that friendship turned into something more. One night, as we sat on the couch, just talking like we always did, I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. She just smiled. And that was when I knew she wasn't just my best friend. She was home, too. A year later, Helen and I got married in a small backyard ceremony. Amanda and Miranda stood by my side, watching as I slipped the ring onto Helen's finger. And when it was all over, when the papers were signed and the vows were spoken, they ran to us, wrapping us both in a hug. "Congrats, Dad," Amanda said softly. "And Miranda?" She grinned up at Helen and asked, "So does this mean we have a mom again?" Helen blinked back tears, holding them both tight. "If you'll have me." And the way they hugged her back told me everything I needed to know. We weren't just a broken family trying to heal anymore. We were whole again. And to make things even better? A few months later, Helen took my hand, placed it on her stomach, and whispered, "John, we're having a baby." For the first time in a long, long time, everything was exactly the way it was meant to be.